Welcome back to the first millennium. When last we talked, we had just reached the peak of the Roman Empire, but a couple things happened before then that we need to cover. And not just the little fun facts, like this dude named Trajan was some kind of war god that made sure to have a super phallic column erected in the town square that showed off his major battles and had a miniature version of himself at the top. I mean, that was a thing. Could you imagine if we still did this today with modern celebrities? I mean, think about it. Kanye. There was this big thing affecting the Roman Empire that eventually leads us to the glorious gladiator times we have been waiting for, and that thing is the Christian church. Yes, we have to talk about religion and the church. I know it's not very cool, but it is crucial to our history. I mean, eventually people are going to crusade over it. So as religion developed, so did music. We started developing notation and theory so that we could train the musicians in the church, and that part is cool. So moving back a little in time, we reach the collapse of the Bronze Age and evolve into the Iron Age. Israel is now being led by King David. You may recognize this interpretation of him by his giant ass hand. I mean, is no one else distracted by that? It's like pointing out Tom Cruise's teeth. I just can't see anything else. So King David was this famous musician who took on the giant Goliath. You may know the story. It's called David versus Goliath. It's like a game of rock, paper, scissors where the rock wins and then off with your head. So how did David get from the giant to being king? Funny you shouldn't ask. David buddies up with the actual king, and in true family fashion, the king's actual son gets super jealous of David because the king likes him more. So there's this huge battle where the king and his actual son die, and David becomes king. There was no royal wedding. Boo! So David goes ahead and conquers Jerusalem and steals the Ark of the Covenant, which is the 10 Commandments in case you haven't seen Indiana Jones in a hot minute, and builds his kingdom. But this kingdom is not without its drama. So there's a soldier in his army named Uriah who has a hot as fuck wife that David loves to watch bathe, as you do when you're king. He's watching from the roof of his palace one day like a fucking creep and decides to send a bunch of dudes over to fetch her. They adult her. She gets pregnant. So David, being the genius he is, tells Uriah to take the day off, relax, go see his wife, Netflix and chill. But he's so dedicated to his job that Uriah's like, I'm good. So the next obvious step is to have him murdered. So David reaches prime douchebaggery by having Uriah take his own death sentence to his commanding officer. So Uriah dies on the front line when everyone else moves at the last minute, so he's hit, so that David can come in, swoop, and marry the widow. Guess what? God saw all of this and thought it was fucked up. So he sent a prophet down to get David to repent, and so David confessed and fooled absolutely no one with that. And so karma took over and killed the sex baby. But the wife had another son named King Solomon, who was the wisest fuckboy in all the land because he sleeps with over 1,000 people. And then he has another son by a different wife, having to kill his half-brother for raping his sister because David did nothing, and decides that he should be king, and the best way to take over the throne was to sleep with 10 of David's mistresses in the town square, and the ensuing battle kills him, and so he didn't actually become king. And you thought the Kardashians were bad. Eventually, fuckboy Solomon takes over for King David, and he builds the first temple in Jerusalem. The Temple of Solomon houses the Ark of the Covenant for about 400 years until it burns down when the Babylonians invade and destroy the city. But King Nebuchadnezzar is trying to be trendy and wants to do this cool thing he heard about in Egypt called slavery. He might sound familiar if you read the Bible. It's okay if you haven't, it's a long book. He learns of God's power when these three guys, Shamrock, Meerkat, and a Grindylow, defy him. King Nebs is going around town saying, I want you to worship this. This is God. And so everyone's like, all right, it's God, or we'll just do it. The three guys look at it and go, rather not. King Nebs throws him into the oven like he's a gingerbread witch, and realizes there's no screaming. So they open up the door. There's a fourth guy in there who's an angel, and they're just walking around chilling. Why they think this is God's power and not straight up witchcraft, I will never understand. But maybe it's because witches weren't trendy yet. Maybe we're a little too early in history. The Babylonian thing, yes, is bad. They destroyed the city. But guess what? The Persians came in, let the Jews come back, and build a second temple. How nice is that? Cyrus the Great. Yay! The one guy who conquered lands with R-E-S-P-C-T. That was until Rome decided that they needed a turn and didn't think that Jews needed their independence anymore. Guess what? People didn't like that, and they wanted to be known as Israel, and Rome said no! So they destroyed the city again and destroyed their second temple and kicked out all the Jews again. I'm noticing a pattern. An uber-local Jew in Rome named Jesus began to preach, and St. Paul and a bunch of influencers decided to spread the word that everyone can be a Christian. And this was a huge hit with the ladies because afterlife, community, equality, and ladies love spreading some goss. But Christianity wasn't officially illegal as long as you still honor the gods, but Christianity is about one God. So it was kind of causing some problems, but eventually Romans started converting, and even Emperor Constantine converted. He eventually passed an edict making it legal and eventually an official religion other than Judaism, and the church became its own empire. The music at this point was basically chanting or cantillation, and where the melodies came from we're not exactly sure because Jewish melodies weren't written down, but Jesus and his peeps would chant psalms and hymns in basilicas. But it wasn't for fun because it could seduce you to sin, especially if you used instruments. Despite references in the Bible that there were harps and trumpets, that was fake because showy singing, dancing instruments were all seen as pagan. And that's extremely fun. I mean, bad, extremely bad. And if you could stay away from the devil music, you could save your soul. On that dark note, the Christian church kept developing with the rise of the Jewish-Roman battle and the eventual crucifixion of Jesus, and Christianity and Judaism would eventually split completely apart. If you mix religion and government, of course, you're going to have some problems. So the Roman Empire splits in two. You have the Western Empire, which is Rome and Milan, and the Eastern Empire, which is Constantinople. These two places start to diverge from each other culturally. You have the western side speaking Latin because it's what the Romans speak, and the eastern side speaking Greek because it's what the apostles speak. The Western Empire starts to build up the Roman Catholic Church, calls their bishop the Pope, coming from the word papa, which means bishop. Clever. And the eastern side is like the great something grandma of the Orthodox churches that you know today. Believe it or not, the Western Empire's churches had different dialects, and so Western music was influenced by 4 different things: the Byzantine chant, the Ambrosian, the Gregorian chant, and the Old Roman chant. I know this is a lot, but stay with me. So the Byzantine chant is like chanting with formulas, like think hymn books. And the Ambrosian chant was so popular in Milan that it convinced the Pope to standardize all the chants into Gregorian chant. And this was spread north by Charlemagne, and everyone was singing these chants and helped unify the church. The Old Roman chant is similar to Gregorian chant, but think more embellished. So we don't know which one came first, Gregorian or Roman. But it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. You don't know which one came first, but they both copied off the same person's test answers. The Western Church was still passing on their melodies orally. They would write down the words, and you would listen to your friends to figure out how to sing it. They did try writing it down once in Greek notation on a bit of paper, but no one knew how to read it, even back then. Memorizing a couple songs doesn't sound that hard, right? But they were having to memorize hundreds of songs. Some only sang once a year. Some were kind of hard. Other people were following a formula, and other people were kind of making it up on the spot. So how on earth could you standardize anything? So notation finally starts to form. You have pneumatic, which above the words you would see the melody line, but no actual notes. Then we had Haydn-Neumes come out that showed the relative pitch. Then we had Guidonian notation that has that F at the bottom, the E on top, spelling F-A-C-E. Sound familiar? Like on our modern sheet music? Yeah. You can thank the monk Guido of Arezzo for that. They started using neumes, or gestures, in the music too, to remind you how to sing something, just like you see accents on French words to remind you how to pronounce something. Now this notation, while it made things easier, you still had to learn everything by ear, but having relative pitch meant we didn't have to rely so hard on oral transmission. So this whole process of notation made it so much easier and quicker to learn and replicate Western music. So a bunch of monks in France interpreted music like flowing sand or like ticks on a clock. These solemn monks created the Vatican version of notation, which looks like this. We used an F and a C, and those became our clef signs. Now that we have notation, we can make music books, right? Johann Gutenberg made that printing press that he was able to print that huge Bible faster, quicker, easier than having monks handwrite every copy. Well, my man Gutenberg is not alive yet, and his invention's like 400 years away, so everybody gets a handwritten copy. These monasteries were set up that one person would write the music and the other person would work the leather cover. It took an entire flock of sheep to make one book, and they had to go hunt the deer and boar for the leather. The handwriting had to be the exact same in every single book. They couldn't have any diversity, and this regime was set up to keep their sins in check because they're spreading the word of God. And you thought cursive in school was bad. Do they still do cursive in school? Is that an outdated joke? I'm sorry. Music theory is still being derived from Greek theory and philosophy because the Middle Ages loved to steal shit from other people. For instance, Boethius wrote the fundamentals of music, and if you ran that book through Grammarly for plagiarism, you'd have to report him to the board. And while he didn't have many original ideas, I did love the fact that he believed that someone who can judge music was considered more of a musician than someone who could sing really well. So they created a thing called church modes that was supposed to help you learn and memorize chants by differentiating whole steps and half steps, kind of like we did tetrachords. But modes get kind of fringy, because you have the authentic mode paired with the plagal mode, so they end on a final note, but in different ranges. I would think of modes as moods. You can have a note in a mode give off a certain feel, and you can use that to your advantage. So I'm going to play you some examples that tell you what the church mode is, as well as the mood it's supposed to give off.
What do you mean? Oh, what do you mean? Said you're running out of time, what do you mean?
Are you going to Scarborough Fair? She once was a true love of mine.
Pill makes you larger, and one pill makes you small, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything.
Heaven can't help me now, nothing lasts forever, but this is gonna take me down.
I only call you when it's half-past, but the only time that I'd be back.
You got to manage.
Fun fact, Guido of Arezzo wanted to make things easier for sight singing, so he added syllables to the steps between notes called ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Sound familiar? Solemnization. We later changed ut to do and added t. So using notation, solemnization, and the Guidonian hand, singers could perfect the craft within 1 to 2 years versus the 10 plus that it used to. While we don't have physical music from these times like we did Greek, we do have some customs that have come about from this time. We have psalms while we worship, we still have notation, we have solemnization, and the notation alone is why we have any of this old music. Charlemagne was at the epicenter of Western Europe and was the reason for this major development in European music by sharing all these standardizations in his empire. Now that we've reached the final split between the Roman and Byzantine churches, we've laid the groundwork for musical customs to resonate throughout the Middle Ages. But for now, this chapter is closed. Thank you for watching episode 2 of Hist-Music-Tory, or Music and History in My Own Words. Please let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see episode 3. Bye!